before we actually start today's video, I want to introduce you to someone. So just give me one sec. Hello! This is Perry. This is my kitty. Sorry, Perry. I've actually just woken her up from a nap. But I just wanted to introduce her. Some of you have seen her on Instagram. Yeah. She's very sassy. Not always happy to be picked up, but I love her so much. And yeah, she's my little cutie. Anyway, I just wanted to introduce you. Sorry, Perry. She was probably covering the mic. But anyway, back to the original plan for today's video. Alright, hi guys. So in today's video, I thought I would take you on a journey to how I make my digital comics. So this one's going to be a little bit different. I am going to make a Thought Cat and I comic. I think I found the kind of style and layout that I want them to have. Take my traditional comics that kind of look like this kind of layout, and I want us to start making them digital. Not necessarily these ones, but the new ones. However, I do also want to, like I said, finish this sketchbook. That's one of my goals. So I have to still do them in here. But every now and again, I also want to do digital comics. I'm going to show you a picture maybe on this side of the kind of look that I'm going for, but I think it could be better. I actually really like how the comics look traditionally, which is ironic because usually I prefer my digital work and how it looks. But there's something about these comics that I enjoy. Like, I enjoy how I draw Thought Cat and myself. Yeah, it's got a kind of look to it that I feel like I can't really capture the same way in like a digital comic, but we're gonna do something different, and through that I think I can also learn a few things, and the more I draw, the more comfortable I will become at it. So yeah, that's all. I just have to get used to drawing Thought Cat and I digitally rather than just traditionally. So what are the tools that I use? Well, of course, an iPad. So I have an iPad 12.9 inch. I think it's a 2018 version, so it's quite an old version. If I am kind of drawing on the go, which I really shouldn't because my back pays the price for it, then I will just use the cover. But if I'm sitting at my desk, when I was in Korea, actually, sorry, give me a minute. So when I was in Korea, I bought this mechanism. Give me 1 second while I readjust the camera view for your sake. A little bit of an awkward view, but that's okay. You don't really need to see me. So I bought one of these. I will be lying to you if I told you what it was because I absolutely don't remember, but I will look it up, and again, I will include it right here somewhere. But this is a very nifty little device. Because you can obviously adjust it. There are 1, 2, 3, 4 adjustments. So you can have it really low if you prefer it. So this is made so you can put your large iPad in it, or you could put a smaller iPad, it will fit. And if you need to charge it, it's also got a little part here for the cable, so that's pretty nifty. And then yeah, like I said, you can adjust it to make it higher, which is better on my back and my neck. Sometimes I do prefer it lower. I also use a glass protector, not a paper-like texture clothes. I did try one of those, however, I think I got so used to the glass that I didn't like it. I didn't actually like hearing the and I didn't like the fact that it wears away the nibs very quickly. So that's something to keep in mind. If you do use a paper-like screen protector, you're gonna have to replace your nibs a lot more frequently. So yeah, glass is uncomfortable in the beginning, but it protects your screen the most effectively, and once you get used to it, it's not all that bad. But I will say nothing beats the iPad without any cover. I am going to adjust this to be maybe like here, and then This was actually the last comic I was working on, and then when I draw, I tend to like really zoom in, and that's the one thing I like about digital drawing. I don't have to worry about like trying to see. It's very convenient because I can just zoom in and I can obviously move it. As you guys know, I mean, it's very obvious. But going back to then trying to draw traditionally is hard because I'm so used to the convenience of digital drawing. The thing that comes with digital drawing is that I have to wear glasses. I can see, but my eyes tend to become very strained, and I think my one eye is a little bit lazier than the other. So I often need to remind myself, okay, I should be wearing glasses to just help with that strain. So yeah, I guess we can begin. Guys, can I just say, I have to close my windows and I have to like put my fan off when I film because of the noise. But oh my gosh, it's summer and I'm dying. So I'm gonna turn it back on and do a voiceover for the rest of it because I cannot take this insanity anymore. I'm so hot. So before I start, don't worry, I'm gonna readjust the camera again. So I'm working on kind of a standard A4 page, let's call it. So the canvas is always, I'm actually looking at the canvas size and I'm like, that's not the page size that I chose. Okay, so when I'm making these comics, I decided that I want to make them A4 size. So when I do that, I work in millimeters rather than pixels. For me, it's just easier to convert in real life. If I make it a certain amount of millimeters, then I know how big that is on a piece of paper. However, I always make the resolution about between 400 to 600 so that the quality will be good even if the size is made bigger. So A4 size, what's that? 210 by 297, I think. That's how big that I make the canvas. And then from there, I usually sketch out the idea that I have, and then I will obviously do the final like rendering, line art, coloring. These are monotone or monochromatic comics. I don't really add much colors to them. I usually just pick a color and then I stick with it. So I've kind of chosen, because I really like how strong black is, I think it works very well for these comics, but I want it to be a little less boring, a little less comfortable. So I decided to go with the brown, but it's still very close to black. So I do like it though. I did try to go for a brighter color and I'll show you, I'll play around a bit, but I just decided that, you know what, the darker colors are a bit more effective. And yeah, I'm just gonna walk you through my process and then you can see how I make a page. This comic is kind of random, like every page will either have its own story or it might be a few pages, but I think we're gonna make a once-off one just for the sake of it. Also, just popping in, I totally forgot that I left the fan on, so apologies. You're probably gonna hear, and yes, it's still on because at this point I can't turn it off. Anyway, back to our regular scheduling. This was the last sketch that I did for the one comic that I was doing kind of a trial run with the layout, and I decided that I preferred this. So initially this is what I did initially because I thought this looked good on like Instagram. However, I, as much as I want to share my stuff on social media, I also have to consider that I want to make things that are not only limited to social media. And I prefer this because it's more dynamic and interesting to look at, and I think just putting these things together that will work better. So yeah, we're gonna go with that, and then boom, this is what it becomes. So like I said, I still have to get a bit used to drawing it digitally. This is not my favorite. I made quite a few mistakes, but again, they don't have to be perfect, and that's kind of the other thing with drawing digitally. I have a problem with having to make things perfect more so than when I'm doing it traditionally, but I don't want them to be perfect. They can look a certain way, it's fine. So for my comics, you read them from left to right. As much as I used to love drawing manga, because the original language is English, I believe that it should then read from left to right. I understand if you're drawing manga and you want to stick to the traditional aspect of reading from right to left. However, I think that is because of Japanese, whereas again, English, it's standard. So yes, this is what it was. So it was just, this is kind of me at work. This is what it looks like when I'm at work. And then ThoughtCat is obviously with me. ThoughtCat needs my help. So he says, hey, I need your help. And then because I'm very cynical with him and I'm not very kind to ThoughtCat, I kind of call him out and I say, if this is about today's Wordle and not actual work, and then lo and behold, it is about Wordle. And actually what inspired me was the fact that I was showing my mom how to do Wordle, and she kept trying to type the same words or use the same letters. And I was trying to tell her, like, Mom, you have to use new letters. Like these letters are not in the word. And so I say, how many times do I have to tell you to not use grayed out letters and not the same ones over and over again? And then he's like, a lot. Because sometimes you have to say things more than once, especially with your parents. So that's sometimes where I get my ideas. I either get them from like everyday life or my friends or family. ThoughtCat obviously also represents myself more than anyone else, but he can also be inspired by the events and people surrounding me. I guess that is what art is, isn't it? So let's start a new comic. Do I have an idea? No, but we will find one. Alright, so when I start, I simply duplicate the previous page because then I don't have to worry about setting everything up again. And then when I start to work, as you can see, I don't like to work on a white background. I think it's very harsh for your eyes. So it's always a good idea to choose another color. And so I usually go with the cream color. The darker the better, the less intense. But I don't really like working on a canvas that's too dark, just not bright white. Anyway, I go in with sketching, and for these comics specifically, I don't tend to use any reference. I just kind of rely on my own knowledge. Sometimes if I need a bit of an interesting hand pose or things like that, then I will go and take a picture, but for the most part, I just wing it. Also, I just want to apologize for my stupid hair. I had no idea it was in the frame for majority of the video, which is very frustrating. So please excuse me, it won't happen again because lesson learned. So as you can see, I just sketch everything out and I write the script. I do that so that I won't forget what I want the characters to say. Also, to save some time, I usually copy and paste if there's certain items repeating in the comic. This is just to save time. If you are a bit more of a beginner, I would encourage you to try and draw the things again and again rather than copy and paste them. It does save time and it is convenient, but for the sake of practice and trying to replicate them, then I would suggest simply trying to draw them again so that you become better at it. I'm obviously not including every single part of the sketching process. It did take quite a long time and my hair covers half the panel at some point, so I cropped it out. But yeah, that is the process of my sketching. I quickly go back over everything and just make sure that I get all the little details before moving on to the final line art. Okay, and now we are moving on to the line art, which is even more boring because you kind of know what to expect now. So again, I'm not going to include every single detail, but I will just show you some of the process. Line art is quite nice in the sense that I don't have to think too hard about anything. Sketching, of course, I'm putting down the idea on page and I'm bringing it to life. Line art, I'm kind of ensuring that anything that looked weird or disproportionate in the sketching, I fix and adjust. So there may be minor adjustments, or sometimes I won't make any adjustments, and then once everything is finished, I will see all the mistakes that I made and then I will cry. Just kidding, but also not really. So I go in, and for these comics I also use my own handwriting because I think it works and it's not too untidy, but if you cannot read it, you are welcome to let me know. And then I also go in and color some of the backgrounds just to add quite a strong contrast in some of the panels. I think it makes things a little bit more interesting. It's not always necessary to do that. I just like to do it because I can also add extra texture in the background. And then once again, I'm lazy, so I copy and paste what I can if there's a duplication of it, like the camera and the backside of my head and thought cat. So you're gonna see I'm gonna duplicate this whole chunk here and paste it, and then I'm going to enlarge it. And that's why it's so important to make your DPI, so dots per inch, or your resolution between 400 to 600, because that's when it's important, because if you need to enlarge something, you're not going to see it lose as much quality, but it will lose some quality. Unless you're working on Illustrator, of course, and you work in vectors, then you won't lose quality. And that's why Illustrator is definitely better for logos and branding, whereas I like Procreate simply for drawing. That was a bit of a tangent, I apologize. Back to me drawing an angry shark version of myself. I love drawing chibis, and to make it more dramatic, I made the hair into horns, and then I finish off by doing the last bit of writing. And of course, I'm gonna go back and fill in anything that I missed. And then I'm going to, of course, sign it and date it, because that is what I do to all my pieces, if I can remember. Once I'm done with that, I just play around a bit to try and convince myself to use another color besides black. But of course, I always go back to black. And then the last step is shading. So I forgot to mention, I use the 6B Procreate sketching brush for my line art. And then I go in with the bamboo soft brush, which I think it's also under sketching, the bamboo soft brush for shading. The process of risograph and the texture that risograph printing leaves actually inspired me to start shading this way. I also use the lasso tool to select the things that I want to color, and that's how I end up filling my pieces and coloring them. That's just a bit of information. If anyone wondered how you get that effect, then you can just simply select using the lasso tool and then fill it in with the bamboo soft brush, and you get a very nice textured look, as you can see in the close-up versions. Now, coloring like this has its perks. It's very quick and convenient. Also, doesn't take too much concentration. However, if you're like me and you tend to merge a lot of your layers, if you make a mistake, or if you need to adjust something and your layers are merged for coloring, just know that you're gonna have to probably redo a lot of it if you have merged your coloring layers. Your shading is different intensities, so I would advise to keep them on separate layers. As you can see, the last process, I again try and convince myself, you know what, other colors are fun too. But once again, I tend to go back to black.